With regard to Hezbollah, I think it's very important to remember that Hezbollah is not an independent actor in terms of its strategic decision making. That movement is a creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it acts in accordance not with its own local desires, but with the interests of Islamic Republic of Iran. What that means in practice is that Hezbollah, in the course of the last 3 years, has been obligated to, not necessarily of its own free will, and to a great extent against its own natural self-interest as a Lebanese political player, it has been obligated to involve itself to a very, very high level in the Syrian civil war. If we think about the fact that as we think there is roughly around between 20 and 25,000 fighters of the Hezbollah organization, at the present time, somewhere between 6 and 10,000 of them are deployed in Syria, constantly being rotated in and out, but at any given moment, there is between 6 and 10,000 Hezbollah fighters, this is not far off half of the entire strength of the organization engaged in Syria. They've been paying a very heavy price in terms of attrition in that war. The latest figures I heard is that they've lost now around 1,000 fighters dead, okay, inside Syria. That's around twice as many, or a little bit less than twice as many as they lost fighting Israel in the summer of 2006. It's a very, very major blow indeed in terms of manpower, and it's a skilled and experienced manpower, including senior commanders, not only cannon fodder, so to speak. This is firstly. Secondly, the involvement in Syria has hit very strongly at Hezbollah's legitimacy within Lebanon, because Hezbollah always maintained that its arms, so to speak, the arms of the resistance, the Muqawamah as they call themselves, were only there to be used against Israel. And in the course of the last half-decade, they have turned those weapons, firstly in 2008, against their own internal political opponents from the Hariri camp in Beirut. And now they've turned those weapons against the rebels in Syria. The Lebanese are terrified of what's going on in Syria. And many Lebanese people feel, with regard to Hezbollah, what are you doing? We should be doing everything in our power to keep that civil war away from our doorstep. And here you are inviting it in by getting yourselves involved in it, and therefore inviting the Sunni response to Hezbollah's involvement in Lebanon itself. We're already starting to see the presence of jihadi forces within Lebanon itself. So Hezbollah's political standing as a result has also suffered from its involvement in the Syrian civil war. But of course it had no choice, because Iran wanted it to go, and it can't say no to Iran. Thus far, the downside of all this from Hezbollah's point of view, and this of course is something for which we as Israelis to feel happy about, there's a potential upside for them as well, of course, which is that they've had thousands of fighters involved in Syria. Many of them have been killed, but those that are not killed are learning vital new skills in terms of their military capability. First and foremost, the ability to fight within built-up areas, which Hezbollah has very, very little experience of doing. They've generally been fighting in open, their style has been to fight in open country, in the famous Shmorot HaTeva, the nature reserves, in southern Lebanon. So now they know about fighting in built-up areas. They also know now how to operate far from their logistical base, in areas which they do not know well as fighters. This is new for them. They never had to do that before. They didn't know how to do it before. Now they do. So they will come out of the Syrian civil war depleted in manpower, certainly, and important manpower. But that manpower that remains will certainly have learnt new skills. In terms of the inventory of weaponry available to them since 2006, we know that it has increased exponentially. And the figure we usually hear today is 100,000 rockets and something up to something like 5,000 long-range missiles. This is a very serious presence indeed. My own sense is that Hezbollah's actions against Israel will be dictated by the Israeli-Iranian file. They don't exist outside of that, which means that should there be Israeli action of a determined nature, for example, against the Iranian nuclear project, which we discussed a moment ago, we can take it almost as a certainty that entire Iranian inventory of 100,000 and then 5,000 missiles and rockets on our northern border was put there precisely for that moment and for no other moment. And at that moment it is likely to be put into the field, and then we'll have to think about that, and we are thinking about that very carefully. But other than in the context of a serious deterioration in Iranian situation, my own view is that Hezbollah right now has its hands full. It's very, very busy with the Syrian war, doesn't have time or energy or effort to begin to engage with everything else. So for as long as the Syrian fighting continues, given that reality, I think we can be fairly confident, I don't want to be excessively confident, we can be fairly confident that a sudden attack by Hezbollah remains an extremely low probability.